Hello and welcome. I am Exalite, and this is my first live stream. Okay, guys, my host for today is my son Jory, and the reason I chose Jory as my host is because we have shared paranormal experiences, and on his own, he's very interested in the paranormal, has had his own experiences, and I trust his judgment and his honesty. So if you will join me in welcoming Jory, say hi to Jory.
Thanks for having me on.
All right. So, a couple of things. You're going to have to excuse me. I am sick. I can't breathe out of my nose or my lungs. So, I'm sorry about that. Second thing is after we've gone through what we're talking about, there will be an opportunity for everybody to ask questions, and we will answer them. Hey, Jeremy? Yeah. It's lagging. I think it's not loading. There's nobody watching. Okay. Okay. There's nobody here right now. So what I'll do is just keep going on. What do you think? Our moderator is Maya, the moderator. Be kind to Maya. And my producer is Jeremy, the producer. Hello, Jeremy. And today's topic is the Demon House and the documentary by Zak Bagans. So, do you want to do a little bit of a background on the Demon House for them, Jor?
Yeah, sure. So, apparently, this was a haunting that took place in Gary, Indiana, where a family, a mother with 3 children, I believe it was 2 sons and a daughter, and the mother's mom were experiencing drastic hauntings, seeing shadow people, hearing voices, footsteps, doors opening and closing, extreme fits of rage, and many things that were also experienced by police officers, professional caseworkers, to the point where eventually it came to Zak Bagans' attention when the family vacated the premises and he bought the house sight unseen, because the tales he was hearing were so extreme that he had to see it for himself. And that's kind of where the documentary begins, is him buying the house and seeing, okay, well, what do we got here? What's going on? And the tales that he hears are probably some of the most extreme eyewitness testimony to paranormal activity I've ever heard, which I'm fairly sure we'll be getting to that here pretty quick, right?
Right. And as far as LaToya, what started this getting national attention is the fact that she had taken her children to the hospital. She had taken her son to the doctor, and at the doctor, he had lost control and tried to attack the doctor. They sent him to the hospital, and while he was in the hospital room with a CPS worker, whose name is Valerie Washington, a psychologist, and another doctor, he began this child, who we're not going to name kids' names. So this child began to walk up the wall and across the ceiling backwards. And it's at that point that the word started getting out and it started becoming well known, and which is why Latoya ended up moving out into it with her brother, and then Zach, of course, bought the house. So what we're going to do about the documentary is we're kind of going to break it up into a few different parts so we can talk about each different part of the documentary separately. So, Joel, we're going to talk about the beginning when Zach tries to make sure that this isn't a hoax. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the documentary begins with Zach wanting to know the history behind the house, which anyone who's a paranormal investigator should. And as he's doing interviews with police officers, family members, he's starting to get a possible vibe of maybe it being a hoax because he was being, I guess the word would be blocked in trying to make this documentary in the first place by Hollywood producers who were trying to turn this story into a blockbuster movie. The former owners of the house would not speak to Zach, claiming it had been because he had been in the house and therefore the demon could have transferred onto him. But it was also admitted that they weren't talking to Zach because they were talking to Hollywood producers as well. So that coupled with, a boy walking up a wall backwards, even with witnesses, and other people claiming that nothing has ever happened to them at all in that house. He really had a hard time deciding whether or not, initially, if this was even a case worth investigating. So it wasn't, I believe, until he started talking to a caseworker who, after witnessing the events of the boy walking up the wall, she had completely quit her job and moved out of the state and required psychological testing herself because it changed her life. And when he did an interview with Officer Charles, and he took him into the basement and he showed him that there was an altar set up under the basement stairs. Now this is completely covered in concrete except for right underneath the stairs, and it's just dirt. And when you're talking to an officer and an officer is telling you, this place gives me the creeps and I saw that and I had to get out of here, that's when I think Zach was like, you know what, it's worth an investigation.
Right. And so he had the home inspected, and the home inspector did say that there was mold in the attic and that could go through the house. He said there was possible carbon monoxide coming from the furnace, although from the sounds of it, it didn't sound like he had personally checked it. And they said that could cause hallucinations, although that doesn't explain the walking backwards up a wall in the hospital, right?
I don't think carbon monoxide makes people do that.
Yeah, I've never seen mold make anybody do that either, so.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything outside of strings attached to you that will allow you to walk backwards up a wall.
You're right. And, unless it's a 12-foot demon goat. Maybe that.
Hey, anything's possible, right?
Right. Okay, so then the documentary moves on, and Mika comes, and Mika lived there as a child. And Mika brought her 2 daughters and her son. And again, we're not going to name children's names. And Zach takes them around the house, and Mika very clearly remembers living there. And she said that she had never felt anything off or had anything happen to her, but she said that she had a friend who had stayed there and said that she would hear footsteps, and I think she said she heard the dog noises as well. Is that correct? Or was it just the footsteps?
If I remember correctly, the friend heard footsteps, but the grandmother of the previous house owners that we were just talking about, she was hearing what she thought was dogs barking in the house, which they didn't have animals at the time.
Okay, so she was hearing the footsteps. And at that time, he takes Mika downstairs to the basement, and Mika had never, ever been in the basement, even though she had lived there as a child. And in the back bedroom, Mika said that that was where her brother had stayed, and that she had had nightmares that he was going to be killed, and she was telling her family and friends, and they all brushed her off, and her brother ended up having been shot.
Mm-hmm.
So the kids are walking around, and why don't you tell us what comes over Mika's daughter? And keep in mind that an important part of this documentary is the fact that when LaToya Ammons lived there and the police and the CPS workers were there, there was oil on the blinds that couldn't be explained. They weren't coming from the top or the bottom. They were coming from the middle. And a caseworker had touched the oil and had become, had her whole hand become white and had a weird experience. Well, Mika's daughter went over and looked through the blinds at the exact same spot as the oil. And then after that, why don't you go ahead, Jory, and tell us what happens to Mika's daughter in the house?
Well, I'll rewind you a little bit back to the basement.
Okay.
So Mika had been telling Zak why she didn't like being in the basement, what happened to her brother, and she's just kind of sitting there and drinking it all in. And she's got two of her children to either side of her behind her. And one of them crosses from right to left, and the other one is stationary just slightly above her on the stairs. Well, after her child passes behind her, she turns to walk also, and one of her legs buckles, and she claims that her son behind her had kicked her. Well, he laughed nervously and was like, "I didn't kick you, Mom." And she was like, "Quit lying to me." Well, upon reviewing the tape, Zak noticed that the child's leg never moved.
That's
and
right.
that her leg buckled. So once we move upstairs.
Can I stop you here for just a second, Jory?
Uh-huh.
I want to introduce you again to the people who just got here. This is my co-host. He and I will be doing our live streams at least twice a month. We are doing another one next Wednesday. He is also my son, so I invited him to be my co-host because we have shared experiences. He has his own experiences. He is very knowledgeable about paranormal activity. I trust his judgment and his honesty in these cases. I wouldn't have somebody on that I didn't trust their honesty about these types of incidences. And as a side note, I want to add, since we're talking about the demon house, that Jory has also met Zak Bagans and worked on an episode of his TV show. So
well, now you're making me blush, Mom. Thank you.
Well, you know, you can give them your. Also, I want to say this: if you guys have questions, we're going to have a question and answer period afterwards. I will not necessarily be seeing what you guys are posting. I do have a moderator, which is Maya, the moderator. Please be nice to Maya, the moderator. And she is looking through all the questions, and she can answer some things. And then my producer, Jeremy, will let me know in my ear if there's something I need to address right now. So at the end, everybody's going to have a chance to be involved with the conversation and what Jory and I thought of the documentary, because we are going to share our opinions on different parts of this documentary rather than just the facts that we're sharing right now. Okay, as we move on upstairs, Jory.
Yes, so as we go upstairs, the daughter of Mika was beginning to look puzzled and absent-minded and kind of lost in thought, and had asked Zak if he had thought the whatever was haunting the house, a demon or whatever, was gone, because they had heard that the house had gone through a couple of exorcisms, and to which Zak told her that he couldn't answer that because he didn't know himself. It ended up being about 2 or 3 days later. She attempted suicide.
Right.
And Mika's mother called Zak Bagans to talk to him about it.
Yes,
or Mika,
right.
I'm sorry. Mika.
Yeah, Mika got,
Yeah, had called Zak and was telling him, like, she went into this extreme fit of rage and was threatening to kill Mika. And when they had found her, she had tiny puncture wounds in her wrists, like she was stabbing herself with something small.
Right.
Did she attempt an overdose as well?
Yes, she also had an overdose.
Okay, yeah, and it's interesting because after the family left the house, before Mika attempted suicide, was when Zak actually began feeling the effects of the house himself, and he went into a rage and attacked Jay Wasley, his producer and cameraman.
Right.
And it's shown on camera, him attacking him, and him, once he's outside, he has no recollection of what he did at all. And when Zak is able to take Mika's family to a church to have a blessing done on the family, and he pulls Mika's daughter aside and asks, do you remember going into the house with me? She doesn't even have a memory of going into the house with Zak. She doesn't have a memory of trying to commit suicide. The only thing that she remembered was that she got angry, and that was it. That's all she can remember.
Yeah, so, she remembers that she threatened to kill her mother in her sleep. Right. And that was it. That was her only memory of it. But also, I'd like to talk about the fact that something we see happen with not only Mika and her daughter, but later on with some other people, is that while they're in their house, they have something come over them where they kind of stand there looking confused. If anybody's ever walked into a room and thought, why am I in here? And you have that look on your face, you kind of stand around and look and play back why you came in and what you were looking for. That's the way they look, a little lost and staring far off, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that happened to virtually everybody who walked into the house.
Right. And that theme continues throughout the documentary as we see more people come in.
Yes.
Okay, so the next thing that we want to talk about is Barry Taff. And Zak called Barry Taff in. Barry Taff has worked on 4,300 cases of potential demon possession or paranormal activity. And he even worked on what would later become known as the Entity case. And for those of you who do not know, the Entity was a very, very famous case. In the late 70s, early 80s, the early 80s, the movie came out, 81 or 82. And it was the first movie that I had ever seen in my teens, much after the movie came out, but I saw it and they said that this was based on a true case. And I had never had anybody say that paranormal stuff could be true. And I had paranormal experiences and not told anybody because I didn't know, is this crazy? What is this? I didn't know that it could be a true thing. So it was interesting that Barry was called in because it was the movie The Entity that really allowed me to say, okay, I get it. I can, this is real fact. So you want to talk about Barry Taff for a little while and what happened with him?
Yeah, so Dr. Barry Taff was brought in because Zak still needed to gather as much evidence as humanly possible, and Dr. Taff's expertise is measuring electric magnetic fields, particularly when it comes to the Earth's natural energy. So he was brought in to test the house, and initially there was no weird readings. Everything read normal until, once again, they went to the basement. Dr. Barry Taff was getting an abnormal reading in the back bedroom where Mika's brother slept prior to his passing. And he was getting a very, very high reading of electromagnetic energy that wasn't anywhere near a wall or a ceiling or a floor or anything that would produce electricity in general. And for him, that's very interesting, because what would be creating this very high amount of energy? And with his equipment, he can tell it wasn't just the Earth's natural energy coming up from the ground into the house. While this was happening, Zak began to be influenced by the energy around him, and he started to feel a pain behind his eyes that he felt like he had to leave the room and take a couple seconds. So while he's doing that, Barry Taff is still measuring the fields, but the fields are starting to not be there anymore. They're going down. Everything's starting to read normal again. And then Zak walks back into the room, and he's explaining the pain that he was feeling, and he slaps his fist into his open hand. And when he does that, Barry Taff's EMF reader skyrockets for just a moment, indicating that Zak's energy has influenced his meter. Now, granted, they're across the room from each other. So for Zak's energy to influence the EMF reader from across the room, to me, that's pretty fascinating. And
Right.
So to see if it was Zak's energy that influenced his EMF reader, Dr. Barry Taff puts it up near Zak's body, and Zak's body is emitting a high amount of EMF.
Right.
And as he's trying to figure it out, Zak makes a threatening motion to Barry Taff without him noticing it. He had his back to him. And the motion that he made towards him also made the EMF reader skyrocket again. Mm-hmm. And Zak once again had to excuse himself because he said he was feeling emotions of hatred, that he wanted to hurt Barry Taff, and he had to leave the room.
And also that he wanted to break down and cry.
Right, that he wanted to cry.
All right. So Barry goes upstairs.
Well, prior to going upstairs, like, Zak's able to walk away and calm down. And it's at this time that now Dr. Barry Taft, I believe he heard, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he heard dogs barking in the basement, right?
Yes,
okay.
He did.
So that was something that the previous homeowner's mother had also heard, dogs barking near the basement. Mm-hmm. And he starts to feel that lethargic, lost in a thought. I believe he almost fainted in the basement at one point, too.
Yes.
And they had to go upstairs because Dr. Barry Taff was actually starting to feel ill.
Yes, he said he needed water to drink.
Yes, he needed a water. So they take him upstairs, and Zak goes outside to calm himself down and get some air. And Dr. Taft decides to turn around from the living room and go into one of the back bedrooms. And this is where it gets interesting, because as he walks to that back bedroom, one of Zak's cameramen decides to follow him, and he captures what appears to be a black anomaly forming to his left, goes into the camera frame, and it's about 6 or 7 frames of this black anomaly forming. Right. And then seemingly it just disappears or goes into the cameraman or something of that nature.
Right, and they took this footage to a man who works for NASA to see if he had an explanation for what this footage was. Was it a shadow? Was it the hand of the cameraman? you know, to try and debunk what they were seeing on the film, which I particularly like that part, that they try and debunk it so that, they exclude everything that it could be. And then the man from NASA said that he had no explanation. It was not something physical. It was not a shadow. Um, so he could not say what it was. So it leaves the viewer to believe that it had to have been some sort of paranormal anomaly who happened to go into Adam, right?
Yes, the cameraman, which shortly afterwards he himself started to become affected uh, by whatever was in the house. And I believe at one point he even went downstairs by himself without anyone's knowledge, went down to the basement and just laid down there until they found him.
Which is crazy in the first place because, okay, so I want to talk about the basement for just a second. One of the things that when the police had to go there for the CPS, one of the things that the police officer noticed, and that was Captain, Jory, help me out here.
Charles Austin?
Charles Austin. And he noticed that the whole basement was concrete except for a little piece under the stairs that was dirt. And there was an altar down there, like you mentioned. But the police dug down there, and in that dirt, they found a pink fingernail, women's underwear, combs, two children's socks, a heavy bar, and a red tin. And Father Maginot said that he thought that somebody had been using this altar to contact the dead, which could have been what allowed this portal to open up, correct?
Yeah, and since you brought him up, would you like to catch the viewers up on who Father Maginot is to this case?
Father Maginot became involved in the case with Latoya and her children. He actually experienced a lot of the paranormal activity that Latoya was claiming was happening to her children. And he wrote to the Catholic Church and asked if he could be given permission to perform an exorcism on this family. And Latoya also. And so he became involved because he performed an exorcism on Latoya, and he was also the priest who was involved in performing I don't know if it was a blessing or an exorcism on Mika's daughter that had tried to commit suicide. So he's a very big figure in this. And the fact that he asked the Catholic Church if he could perform an exorcism, the Catholic Church doesn't just hand out allowances for exorcism. There has to be quite a bit of proof before they do that. So, yeah, that is Father Maginot. Sorry about that. Go ahead, Jory.
And if I remember correctly, he provided enough evidence for the Catholic Church to respond very quickly and approve the exorcism. It was one of the fastest approvals that the church has ever given for an exorcism, which goes to show you the kind of evidence that Father Maggio had.
Well, and he had a doctor, a psychologist, and a CPS worker all claim to have seen this child walk backwards up a wall. So, I think that's pretty good proof. These are people who are not having a mass hallucination. They're not in the house. They're not affected by mold or carbon monoxide, and who tend to be people we would consider reliable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so do you want to talk about the last part of the documentary, and then we can talk about the effects that the house has had on everybody?
Well, I do want to touch on Adam, the cameraman, a little bit more.
Okay.
Just to kind of show, or not necessarily show, but tell the people just what effect this house has on people probably more so than others. But
Yeah.
Jay Wasley had known this man for years. They were friends. He trusted him enough to bring him onto this case. And after being found in the basement, his attitude completely changed. They actually had to turn their cameras on at the hotel they were staying at because he went into a fit of rage in an elevator, I believe, because he had seen the 12-foot demon goat man that Zak had seen in his dreams prior to buying the house and was challenging it. And just to put a perspective on this as well, just above them in the hotel was where Dr. Barry Taff was staying.
Mm-hmm.
And he was thrown out of his bed and had blood coming out of both ears.
Right.
At the exact same time this was happening.
Right.
So Adam's behavior escalated from the hotel, and he had to be excused from the documentary because I believe he had told Zak that he should go into the bathroom of the house, break the mirror, and slit his wrists or his throat.
Yes.
Pretty much he told Zak he should go kill
himself.
And
so Zak fired him.
Zak Bagans had to fire him because of his extreme change of personality was scaring everybody else on the crew. And Adam went on to go down into a downward spiral of
Satanism.
It would appear that way. Tattooing 666 on both of his hands, having satanic markings drawn onto his body. The house profoundly changed him in a very extreme sense.
He stopped talking to Zak after this, and he wasn't the only crew member that left. When Mika's daughter tried to commit suicide, one of the crew, who I have a guess about. I have a guess about who this crew member is, in case anybody wants to know. He also quit, and maybe we'll touch on that at the end of this because I want to talk about that crew member. So basically, the documentary wraps up by Zak being shut into the house. Every window and door is boarded up. They put some furniture in there, so it looks like it's lived in. And Zak has no way to communicate except for the fact that he has a phone, and he has a handheld camera with him. And then of course there's cameras throughout the house. He goes in there at 8 p.m. Is that right, Jory?
I think the first timestamp they give us is about 8:30.
Okay.
So I would guess that's probably what time he went in there.
Okay, and so he's there for a long time, and nothing happens. He he starts to walk downstairs, but he films it, but he doesn't actually go downstairs, which, in my personal opinion, I wouldn't have gone downstairs either. But I'm not a paranormal investigator. And the time just goes by and by and by, and he's finally laying on a bed that's upstairs in the room, and it's about 6 o'clock in the morning when Zak sits up and he's rubbing his eyes, and we hear footprints finally. Zak jumps back on the bed. The camera falls beside Zak, and it becomes very blurry. It won't focus. And it's at that moment that we see a tall, black figure, very blurred, walk past the door to the bedroom where Zak is in. And Zak is continually saying, "Get away, back off of me." And he sees the figure, and he throws something from his room out towards the figure. And then the next thing you know, he's saying, "Get me out of this effing house." Although, I'm sorry, he has extreme pain in his eyes right after this. Extreme pain. And we can see him holding his eyes and saying, "Oh, my eyes, you know, they're hurting really bad," which is the second time in his house that his eyes were giving him a lot of extreme pain. Do you want to talk about what happens to Zak's eyes now, or do you want to include it in what happens to everybody who had gone into the house, Jory?
Well, I'm going to back you up a little bit because Zak does get an EVP in the house.
The noise, you're right. We hear a growl.
No, not just the growl. When he couldn't bring himself to go all the way down the stairs to the basement, which I don't blame him, especially when it's pitch black and all you have is night vision. So at one point he's in the kitchen, he has the basement door closed, and he's filming through the small little window that separates him from the basement. And you hear a woman's voice say, "That's my baby," or at least that's what he thinks it says. I can't remember. I remember watching it and thinking it said something else, and the person that I was watching it with agreed with me, but Zak's interpretation of it was, "That's my baby."
Well, I'll say that I was watching it with somebody else, and before it even came up on the screen, they said, "That's my baby," and then when it came up on the screen, they were pretty proud of themselves because they figured out what the EVP was. So, you know, I don't know. I think it's up for interpretation. But go ahead.
I know. I heard. I'd have to go back and watch it again to actually remember what I thought it said. But it does also sound like it says, "That's my baby." And
they did have a baby doll in the bedroom sitting on a dresser.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
And then to fast forward to your point previously where Zak was on the bed prior to the black shadow figure that he sees, to me, it originally sounded like a door was opening at first, but then there was this curl of a growl at the end that kind of lends to what people might have been hearing as far as what they thought was dogs barking.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it's like a very serious, threatening bark, which actually gave me goosebumps because I wasn't expecting the curl at the end. I just thought a door was opening, and then I heard the violentness of the end of the EVP, and I got goosebumps. That was pretty scary.
Well, what we thought, who I was watching it with, what we thought was that it did sound to me like a goat, like the way they make their. I'm not going to do a goat noise right here, guys. I will. It kind of went like, nah, like that, like the squeak of a door. It went, nah, but in a deeper way than I'm doing it. And then at the tail end, you catch it go from that to like really guttural. I mean, a dog is really going to just tear you apart right now. A guttural, scary growl that we rewound it several times because we were like, oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. Zak was the window was boarded up, and Zak was trying to get his body out of a boarded up window. He was backing up so far. I thought he was going to try and go through a solid object.
I probably would have gone through a solid object, Scooby-Doo style.
I would have too.
So like Scoob, like we gotta get out of here.
Yeah, I don't think it's the old man down the street, Scoob. So yeah, we rewound that several times, and you can see the like legitimate fear on Zak's face.
Yeah, it was a good thing he was wearing black pants because we probably would have seen more than we bargained for.
Yeah. And then, of course, the camera is down at his side, and the camera cannot focus. And Zak is not worried about holding the camera at this point, which I can understand as well, seeing as what he had just heard, right?
Mm-hmm. I would be not worried about my camera at that point.
I don't know how he left the room personally, because there was one light in the house, and it had the string that comes down. You can pull it on, and Zak was not happy about turning that light off at the beginning of this part with him alone.
The part I've been thinking about is, so you mentioned earlier he threw an object at the black shadow, and we see it skid across the living room floor.
Right.
I'm wondering if that was his phone, and that's the only way he could contact the outside world, which means he still had to leave the room to go get his phone.
You're right.
And I know if I was in that situation, I would be screwed because I would not be able to get off that bed, much less go find my phone and call somebody to be like, get these boards off the door and get me the hell out of here.
I think I would have opened that window and just kicked the board out. Although I wouldn't have wanted to turn my back on the door either.
Yeah, I just, that would be one of those things where I'm like, I really hope it's daylight out. And if I
scream loud enough.
Yeah, maybe if I scream loud enough, maybe my crew will hear me.
Yeah, so he went out and he did turn that light on. But I do think it was his phone. And the next thing, after his eyes are hurting, we hear him say, "Get me out of this effing house."
Right, yeah, he's screaming that,
I would have started that much sooner than he did. I would have stood he went to the kitchen and going, my eyes hurt. I would have done that outside the house. I wouldn't have stayed in that house any more time than I would have had to after I had heard that noise. No, thank you.
Well, I think that, with the house still boarded up, I'm assuming it was still boarded up after he turned the lights on and his eyes hurt. I'm not sure if he had much of a choice.
Right.
I guess I'm just going to sit here with my burning eye sockets while I wait for people to unboard me from a house.
Right.
I would have left at least one way to escape. That way, at least I have one way out.
Yes. Exactly. Sorry, I would have been out of there. Okay, so let's go through what happened to the different people in the house so that we can start talking about our opinions of the documentary. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay, so obviously we know that Mika's daughter tried to commit suicide. Mm-hmm. The original, as of now, it's torn down now, but they had gotten a phone call by the police and said that somebody was breaking into his house, and the police would not go in there. They were like, no, we don't go in. Like, you can go check it out if you want to. So the original CPS worker, she moved out of town to a different state and started seeing a therapist because it had affected her so badly. The next caseworker that had gone in there, CPS worker, she had, within a short period of time, within 30 days, she had like 3 broken ribs, a 3rd-degree burn, a broken hand, and a broken ankle. The home inspector, he was choked by some unseen force. Sorry.
And I do believe he was diagnosed with cancer shortly after the home inspection as well.
Yeah, take this for a second.
Oh, okay. And Officer Charles Austin, who was one of the police officers that Zak focused on his documentary, he had, after, I think it was probably about 2 or 3 days after leaving the house, after having lunch, walked outside, and he felt like both of his legs came up from underneath of him, and he fell down to the sidewalk, hit his head, and was out for unconscious, I should say, approximately about a minute. And I believe it was after filming this documentary, he was on a case where he was shot as well.
Right.
Which, yeah, I mean, crazy.
And then there was a couple, and we're not going to mention their names, but there was a couple who are frequently seen on Zak's show. Anybody who watches it regularly will know who I'm talking about. A husband and wife team. And the wife had contacted Zak and said that she had contacted a spirit in the house, and they had caught an EVP, and she played it for Zak. And within a month later, her husband killed her, their roommate, and himself in a double murder-suicide, which I think is the most extreme effect that we see from the house.
Even Father Maggio was thrown off a bike.
Yep.
After performing one of the exorcisms on the house.
Right. And Barry Taff, he ended up being hospitalized on the same day that Adam was starting his freak out because all of his organs in his body started shutting down at the same time. So he was actually hospitalized. They never found a reason for it. And he's still, to this day, having health problems from it. And this is a guy who's been to 4,300 paranormal and demon possessions and the Entity. And if you haven't seen the Entity, go watch it because that's a huge case and a scary paranormal activity. Is that everybody we covered? Yeah, I think so.
We didn't talk about Zach. What happened to him?
Oh, yeah. Well, duh. So, go ahead. Well, Zach ended up, when he walked out of the house, he had double vision. And he ended up going to a specialist in Las Vegas and LA. And his eyes were injured. And he has to wear special glasses now because they fear that if they were to do surgery on his eyes, he would be completely blind.
Yeah, the condition, he was diagnosed with an eye condition. It's called, I know I'm gonna pronounce this wrong. It's diplopia or diplopia.
Yeah.
And he has to wear a special prism glasses.
Yeah.
Because as you said, doctors fear if they perform a surgery on him, he may go blind. So that's why when you watch Ghost Adventures, he's wearing those goofy nerd glasses.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, and we just watched an episode last night, and we were talking about, like, you can tell pre-Demon House and post-Demon House because of the glasses he's wearing.
Right.
Okay, so do you want to get into our opinions of the documentary?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. All right. So.
Sorry, did I hear Jeremy say something?
Yeah. Oh, well, duh, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Zach, after his solo investigation where he was boarded up, and after he had seen the effects of what it has done to other people, decided that the house was no longer safe, or I shouldn't say no longer. The house isn't safe for human habitation. And as a result, he bulldozed it to the ground. And then the interesting thing about him bulldozing it to the ground is he admits that the curiosity of an investigator overtook him, and he actually kept pieces of the house for himself. It shows it in a storage unit, but I do believe he's moved it into his haunted museum in Las Vegas.
Yes.
He kept the original basement stairs that were over the patch of dirt. And he kept several buckets of the dirt itself.
Which is crazy to me.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's
in case anyone's
crazy
wondering, if you go to Gary, Indiana, and look for the Demon House, all you're going to find is a dirt lot.
Well, it's actually, I think it's the, doesn't he have the concrete still there? The concrete foundation? Or is it?
I don't know if the foundation's still there or not, but I do know that he stayed in touch with the Gary, Indiana Police Department.
Yeah.
And they're saying that they are constantly still having to go to that plot of land because neighbors are calling and complaining about satanic rituals being performed on the land that the house sat on.
Right. And can I talk about something in this regard? Because I bring that up a lot in my true haunted stories, that I can't help but wonder if a house or property something has happened on this property and it retains the energy. We all give off energy. Everything is energy. Does it retain the energy of something evil having happened on that property or in the building or house or whatever it is that is haunted? It seems to me, and I wanted to talk about this too because one of my subscribers, Andy, asked, wasn't it stupid to tear down the house when it clearly could be used for scientific purposes if this is truly happening? And while I agree that maybe you should leave the house up, the problem is as people were squatting in this house. It didn't matter that somebody owned it. They were just squatting in this house. So you'd have the danger of Zach owning a house that people are squatting in which they could sue him if something happened, which is crazy, but true. Also, I think that it's the property. I think that you can take away the house, but something is there. Something is there, I think. And I don't know if other people think if that's how they think, or if you tear the house down and the ghost leaves or the demon leaves. Is that how that happens? Or is it in the building, in the trapped energy? What do you think, Jory?
Uh, you know, that's a good question. um, so, Father I don't know, I'm going to butcher his name too. Father
Maggio.
Maggio, thank you. He used a very strong word when describing the altar underneath the stairs. He said necromancy, which is an extreme form of what people call black magic.
Yeah.
And to use black magic for any purpose, I think creates some kind of a stain or a portal that, in some cases, maybe knocking down a house or maybe blessing a house, that might be enough. But with the extreme case that we're talking about now, I couldn't tell you if that goes with the house, even if you bulldoze it down. I mean, Zach has pieces of the house, and he talks about it a lot on his show, Ghost Adventures, how buildings can absorb energy, much like, like wood would absorb rainwater.
Right.
A building itself can absorb the energy, and you can tear down a building all you want, but the pieces are still going to have attached energy,
right,
to go along with it. So while necessarily it might not be as an extreme case, you might still have a taint of that evil
right.
wherever you go. It's just it's hard to tell. But I think if you're using, and supposedly this might have been the former owner's ex-boyfriend that might have been practicing black magic.
Right.
Latoya, her ex-boyfriend. If there's a case for somebody's investing that much of their energy into something of that nature, I think it could saturate not just the house but the land as well.
Right, I think so too. And if you've ever has anybody ever walked into some place and instantly felt like, oh, this feels very comforting and warm, or the exact opposite? Like 11 days ago, I walked into the Scriven Hotel with my husband, and my husband said that it felt ominous, which is a big word to use for how it feels in a building. And it did feel that way the second you walk in. And it was St. Patrick's Day. They were having a party in the bar, and it did not help. It was ominous. It felt scary. And I can go, like, for instance, I can go to New Orleans and say that has the exact opposite feeling for me. It's welcoming, it's calming, it's warm, and so it lends to me to believe that a building or a place or a property can have that energy stay. Which leads me to my next question, which is, can Zach bring the energy of all these places he's gone to, demons he's dealt with, to a place like the demon house and not have something go terribly wrong? Can he bring his own energy, and what does that look like when you're coming up against a 12-foot, supposedly a 12-foot demon goat?
Right. Yeah, watching his show, he has admitted that he feels like the more he paranormal investigates, the more attuned he is to energies. And so I think he says he gets cleansed after every investigation, which, that might work. But I think he's been paranormal investigating for a long time. I think if it's not something that's attached to him, I think it's like you said, he's just become such a lightning rod, I guess you could say. Like if you really want to break down walls here, if you're a believer of the paranormal, is it possible as a living person to gain a reputation on the other side of the curtain? And these entities know of Zak Bagans because of everything that he's done in the paranormal field. And it makes him a lightning rod. And it draws these energies to him because they know what he does.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
I think it's very possible that even Zak walking into that house, maybe whatever, because these squatters were claiming, and unless they were paid money, that they weren't being affected by anything. Now, if you paid them money, it might be a different story.
Yes.
But they were claiming originally that they weren't having anything happening to them. So let's say we take them to that word, that nothing was happening to them.
Yes.
And then Zak walks into this house. And now all of a sudden, everybody that Zak brings into this house is having all of these things happen to them. Maybe it's him charging whatever was dormant and is now awake again. But that's just, it's a theory.
And also, I believe that there are people who are more open, receptive to having these experiences. I think that as children oftentimes see and hear things, and we tell them that it's not real, which hardens them to being open to any other experience they might have later on. And then, you become skeptical. And I will say right now that I am a huge skeptic, which is completely ironic considering I've experienced a lot of paranormal activity. But I think that maybe the squatters there, obviously, they were, according to the police and everything, doing drugs and drinking and whatnot, which could very well dumb down, numb them to having an experience, right? And if you're not open-minded, I think that, or you're this kind of person who, I think I and you happen to be the kind of people that have things happen to them. And I don't know why certain people are open to it and certain people are not. But, your sister would see things when she was little, and your brother drove by a teeny tiny minuscule strip mall and said there's dead people in there when he was 3. There's dead people in there. And I didn't find out until I had to take a driving class because I got a ticket, that it used to be that little city's original hospital. There were dead people in there. So if you continue to tell your kids that's not true, there's no dead people, then they grow up being not believing, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that could play a role into it. But I think I've witnessed complete skeptics who, from the get-go, are just, nope, that doesn't exist. Nope, show me real proof, show me real proof. I've seen them see the real proof, and it's flipped their entire world. The paranormal field, I think, I think people need to stop approaching it with a closed mind, because if you're a religious person, you already believe in an afterlife already. You already believe that you have a place for you on the other side. So if you already believe that there's a place for you on the other side, and you believe that there's a heaven for you to go to, or if you believe that there's a hell for bad people to go to, then you already, in a sense, believe in the paranormal. So to say, oh, ghosts don't exist, but when I die, go to heaven, for me, it's just, if someone has a paranormal experience and they tell you about it, and they say, oh, we should go check out this haunted house, go for yourself. Don't shoot it down. If you have an experience, great. Then you'll experience something. If you don't, then you can still be a skeptic. Nothing really changes outside of the fact that if you have a paranormal experience, holy cow, I just saw a ghost, or holy cow, I just heard something I shouldn't have heard, or I just saw something I shouldn't have seen. So the only thing you're really doing is either reaffirming your own beliefs or seeing something that will change your life.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about the things that we're going to look at as a skeptic in regards to this documentary. Okay? So the first thing I'm skeptical about is this. From the get-go, I'm skeptical about this house inspector who says there's mold upstairs, so there's probably carbon monoxide leaking. I don't think that that's something we guess on. Carbon monoxide kills people. Families go to bed in their house and never wake up because of carbon monoxide poisoning. So if you are truly a home inspector, you didn't inspect the furnace for this, and Zach goes immediately into, well, can that cause hallucinations? And he's like, well, yes, of course. Or can the mold cause hallucinations? Well, yes, of course. Well, I would like to then see the science on that, not on the mold. I want to see science on mold in your house or anywhere causing someone to walk backwards up a wall. I don't want to, oh, it's mold, causes hallucinations. Well, or there might be carbon monoxide. As someone who is very skeptical, I want to see the proof live and in color. And I didn't like it that he used that home inspector because, to me, he didn't inspect that home. So
I would have liked to have at least seen like a small snippet of the guy inspecting the home. That way we have seen, okay, this guy went in there and he tested for mold, he tested for carbon monoxide, he tested for asbestos, If you're going to try and
debunk that it's fake, debunk it.
Yeah, even maybe show us trying to see if there's, I can only tell from the documentary, but the neighborhood seemed like you could probably have a lot of break-ins, or you could have an animal problem,
they said it was really high in crime there.
Yeah, it had a high crime rate issue over there. So, in it being, just had show us like, okay, we brought this guy in, he did this, and then we see it. We brought this guy in. There's no animal issues. There's nothing literally in this house, whether it's a gas or anything, that could produce the hallucinations that people would experience in those situations.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so what's your skeptical issue with it?
So my issue is Zach's solo investigation of the house. Now, paranormal investigating is not an exact science. We can sit here and we can say, oh, the paranormal puck allows us to communicate with ghosts, and we can say the EMF meter allows us to detect electromagnetic fields, and here's here's my recorder that can record EVPs, but it's not an exact science. And I shouldn't say we, paranormal investigators like to claim that spirits are able to manipulate electronic objects. Now, whether that's true or not, it's up for debate. But as Zak's on the bed and he shifts to the camera, for me, it seems very coincidental that the camera just happens to go out of focus when we finally see a full-bodied apparition appear in front of him and move through the hallway.
Yeah.
Now, is it because the camera is autofocusing on the bed, or is it because the camera is trying to autofocus on something that technically isn't there, or is it because the entity is manipulating the camera? I don't know, but the coincidence of the camera being blurry as this figure appears, it to me allows skeptics to say, how can you tell me to believe in ghosts when your only real full-bodied apparition that you captured, you couldn't even capture that with a fully focused camera? Why is it out of focus? So it's a tough one. It's a tough one for me, because I do believe, but I also understand skeptics why they watch these paranormal ghost shows and say, how am I still supposed to believe in ghosts when that's not technically real evidence? It's hard to sit there and watch this black shadow appear in front of Zak and say, oh man, I can't believe you just caught this figure. That's amazing. Okay, well, it's out of focus. And you can show us all the camera frames you want, but that's you showing us the camera frames that you want to show us. So when you show the entire house that's empty, well, you're only showing us what you want us to see.
That's right.
Now, I'm sure Zak, I don't want to call Zak's credibility out because he's been doing this for years. I'm sure if you asked Zak, I'm sure he would be more than happy to show you his 10 plus hours of evidence to prove he was in that house by himself. I'm just saying, from the hour and 30 minutes of documentary I watched, that yes, while the EVP you caught was cool, and the other EVP you caught was cool, it's just hard on a skeptic's point of view to see this black shadow and say, oh, yeah, that's a black shadow. Of course.
Well, I think that's what we're doing, is playing devil's advocate rather than, Dragon's Zak Bagans, because, like you said, he's had a lot of experience. I'm just saying I want to talk about it not only from a person who believes in the paranormal, but as somebody, as there's a lot of people who don't. So I want to address those people. I have a lot of people on who make comments and say, I just wish I could see something that was very, very real. And the fact that what Zak caught was blurry, I think that lends more credence to, it was blurry. How do we know what that was? And I wish that it was like I said, it took 3 years for this documentary to be made. In 3 years, you caught a couple EVPs, a possible anomaly, and this blurry image that we can't really see. And compared to what the claims of this house were in the beginning, that these children were possessed by a demon, that Latoya's brother went and talked to Zak, and they wouldn't let him back in the house. They were so scared that that one of the police officers, his wife claims that he brought a demon home from this house. So with all this activity that had been going on in the 3 years of this documentary, and obviously a lot of it was editing as well, and they took some time off because Zak didn't want to go back in the house. But I feel like, as if I'm looking at it from a skeptic point of view, that you would say, I need more. I need more than that.
Yeah, it's like you said, it was a 3-year process. Obviously, it didn't take 3 years to do one investigation, but I feel like that the documentary relied more on what happened to people physically and emotionally rather
Yes.
than showing physical proof of the afterlife itself, or even just this 12-foot demon goat thing that Zach had dreams about.
Yes.
Which, if you're going to rely more heavily on the things that had happened to these people rather than more the paranormal aspect of
Yes.
the physical paranormal evidence, it can then be broken down by a skeptic that all those things are purely coincidental. Like that guy could have
Like,
been the home inspector who was diagnosed with cancer. He could have had cancer prior to even inspecting the house and not have known it.
yeah, the police
Um,
officer falling and hitting his head.
a police officer falling and hitting his head. If I remember correctly, I do think he said it was icy outside.
Yeah, I think he did.
A police officer, the same police officer being shot. He's a police officer. That's his line of work.
Yeah.
What else? Dr. Robert Taff's organs failing. Now, granted, in the way that it happened to him is very abnormal. Doctors can't explain it. But is it something that could happen anyways? Yes, that can happen because we are humans and our bodies can shut down like that. So
Right.
if you're trying to look at things in that perspective, a skeptic can just say, well, what if Mika's daughter was already suicidal before she even went to the house? These are things that it's just purely coincidental.
Right.
Now, do I believe that the house had an influence on these people? Sure. And you can also approach that in a two ways. With a fork in the road, I should say. On one hand, could the house influence them? Yes. But could it also have been they went into the house with the idea that it was haunted, and that then influenced whatever happened to them? That's also a
Right.
possibility. So I
Right.
think that the documentary would have come off with a little bit more of a home run. I liked it. Don't get me wrong. I really liked it.
Yeah, I did too.
With a bit more of a home run if there was more paranormal evidence rather than just, oh, this is what happened to the interviewees and my cast and crew.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I liked the documentary. I did, and I'm someone who believes in paranormal things, so I can see it from a different point of view. I can see that, in my opinion, Zach looked scared. And you can fully believe that Zach 100% believes that this happened to him. So I'm not doubting that at all. I was just wanting to also to look at it from both sides because I think we have a responsibility to do that as well.
Of course.
Okay, so let's start going towards some questions, and also I want to talk about while we're waiting for questions. Hey, you guys, if you have questions, post them, and that way we can talk to you about your questions. Or if you have an opinion, post that, and we'll talk to you about what your opinion is, and let's have you guys get involved too. I also want to talk to you, Jory, while they're posting questions. Who do you think was the member of the crew who quit?
Well, I already know who you think would.
Okay, who do I think quit?
Well, I know you think it was Nick Groff.
I do think it was Nick Groff. I think, and I heard.
Yeah.
I heard from the very years ago. I read something that said that Nick Groff quit during the filming of this documentary because he took a demon home to his family and he felt like he couldn't do it anymore. And then, of course, he got his own show and he, just went on to, to drag Zach in his show and say it was fake and everything. But when it first happened, that was the story, was that this documentary was too much for him. So is there somebody else that you think might have quit?
Well, the documentary to me just leads to believe that's just someone on his crew quit. Could have been a producer, a cameraman, a sound guy, blah blah blah. So for me personally, I don't know. It could be Nick, but at the same time, he does a show now with Katrina Weidman called Paranormal Lockdown, and they had a good chunk of their series show him trying to get over having another demon possession issue based off of the Black Monk House in England. So it just seems weird to me that he would quit being on Ghost Adventures and quit being on this documentary because of a demon from the Demon House in Guyana, but be okay to completely document his other demon issue that he had with the Black Monk House. But I mean, like you said, it's still a real possibility that it could have been Nick Roth and he could have quit because of what he experienced at the Demon House. Because, if you're bringing home a demon that's terrorizing your family, you got to take care of your family first. So.
Yeah, and you know what else I think? I think money talks and BS walks. And if Nick was then offered his own show, then you kind of, okay, I'll put myself back in that position again. I'm just saying. I think it was Nick. Okay, so Victor Lyons wants to know, will I be making my own true crime documentary? I don't know. I would love to do that, personally. I'm interested in that stuff. That's fascinating to me. I don't know. Let's wait and see. That's a good idea.
A true crime documentary?
Yeah, a true crime documentary.
Juicy.
I would love that. Yeah, because a lot of the stuff I do is about true crimes, and thank you, Victor Lyons TV. That's very nice. I appreciate that compliment. Because he said, because you would make a great one. You have excellent creativity. Well, thank you. I would be very interested in doing something like that. Do you like true crime stuff, Jory?
I like to. I don't really think it's necessarily the crime. I just like to know what makes that particular person tick. Like, let's say we're talking about a serial killer. Like, it's fascinating to me that somebody could take another person's life without so much as batting an eye. Like, that kind of stuff just is like, because there's people in this world that make you angry, and you just want to lash out at them and maybe hurt them a little bit. But like, I could never in my wildest dreams just kill somebody in cold blood. So the fascination is there. Like, I was just watching a true crime documentary on the Menendez brothers, excuse me.
Right.
And they cold-heartedly killed their parents for money, and it's just like, wow, it is fascinating what people will do to other people.
Well, did they kill their parents for money, or was it because of abuse? I'm a terrible. Here's where I have an issue. I can look at something like that. By the way, I want to say hi to Mickey. Thank you for agreeing with that. Also, Victor Lyons TV wants to know what your YouTube channel is called, Jory, because he would like to subscribe. So if you want to give that out, you can give that out, Jory.
Well, I do technically have a YouTube channel, but it's been dormant because myself and my partners all have, lives to live. But if you go to Exit Light's channel and go to her channels, it should be the Friends with Benefits channel. It's more focused on comedy and skits, but I do have true ghost stories posted on there. If you're more interested in the paranormal aspects, I do have true ghost stories on there, and I do plan on kicking the channel back up. It's just, once I can get my schedule back to a calmer aspect. But right now it's dormant. I haven't been able to do much. But yeah, if you want to go check it out, go check it out.
He also has several stories on my channel. So You can look through my playlist, and I'm always given credit for the stories that he tells on my channel. And he'll be here at least 2 times a month, and he will be here next week on Wednesday as well. Also, I was going to say about the Menendez brothers, I have this weird thing where I can say, yeah, they were convicted of brutally murdering their family, their parents, for money, but they claim that they had some severe abuse, and then I go, well, was it because of the abuse? So, maybe I'm a sucker. I don't know. Not that gives you a right to kill somebody, obviously, and they added money with a bonus.
Even if you agree with the fact that the father was abusing the children physically and mentally, the way they were murdered was very animalistic.
Yeah, that was angry.
Full of rage.
Yeah, that was rage.
And so, I'm one of those kind of people where it's like, if I'm not there, how do I truly know? So I was like 5 years old when those murders happened, 4 or 5 years old.
Right.
I couldn't tell you if it, what the legit reasons were. I can tell you from watching what I've watched that they were very much enjoying the high life with all that money when their parents died. Right. And even their own friends remarked that while there was emotion, there wasn't a lot of remorse over what happened to their parents. So, if you can lean either way you want, but the proof is in the pudding. They killed their parents, and even if you factor in the abuse, they still killed their parents. So, yeah, it still is fascinating to me that. If it was done in self-defense, that would be one thing, but they were just sitting there watching TV.
Well, so if you guys like true crime stuff, I do a lot of true crime stuff on my channel as well. Unidentified murder victims, to try and help somebody identify these mostly women who are never claimed, nobody's ever put out a missing persons report for them, and it's just really sad. And also, Victor Lyons TV does a great job of talking about those victims. So if you guys want to hop over there and watch that, he does a great job. Anyway, if there's no more questions about the Demon House or the Demon House documentary, then I think we're looking at like 2 hours right now, Jor. So I guess we better go, and we'll be back the same time next Wednesday. And what we're going to talk about is the Hat Man, which is a type of a shadow figure, but a very specific type that Jory has personally had experience with. And I think you guys will really like it. It's creepy. It's paranormal. It's what we like here. So I want to thank everybody for being here. I really appreciate it. And you're welcome, Victor Lyons TV. You deserve the shout out. And thank you, Jory, for being my new co-host. I hope everybody likes Jory. He's a great person, I might say. Thank you, moderator Maya. She's been doing a great job. And thank you to my producer Jeremy, and I guess we're going to know them as that, moderator Maya and producer Jeremy. And thank you guys for coming, and thank you for supporting my channel. And if that's all, then I guess we'll say goodnight, right?
Yeah. If no one has any more questions, then it was fun being on. I look forward to being back on next week.
I do too, and I think we had a great first live stream. I loved it. So Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you later. Good night.